Thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion. It's a complex issue that involves individual human suffering and the broadest of geopolitics impacting the global balance of power. Now, for any newspaper editor, the assassination of a charismatic national figure by a lone individual is a compelling story. Add to that the harboring of a long-ago grievance about a politically connected religious organization, and you have a cocktail of intrigue that sells newspaper and hikes ratings. But underneath lies a tapestry of stories which the media has so far barely brushed. They will, I hope, because it is important and it is their job. How is it, we must ask, that the needle of interest has so seamlessly shifted from the flawed gunman who killed Shinzo Abe to the Unification Church, which he blamed for taking donations that his mother could not afford decades ago? An examination of the Japanese press coverage is telling on this. A survey of some 5,000 stories carried out by a highly experienced media company shows that the first month's reporting focused on that trouble between the church and the killer's family. The story was placed mainly in what in Japan are known as the social pages, as opposed to the political ones. In August, that emphasis shifted to the relationship between the church and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Thus, it became a political story, and in the second week of August, the cabinet reshuffle began. Those moved out were accused of using the Unification Church to campaign on their behalf. Now, let's linger with that line for a moment. An upheaval within the cabinet of one of Asia's very few fully developed democracies and a staunch American ally had been caused by politicians allowing a religious organization to help with their campaigning. Yes, there's also the controversy of spiritual sales, but the Roman and Anglican churches are far from squeaky clean. And can we imagine in Latin America, for example, such an accusation taking hold if a member of the Catholic Church campaigned on a politician's behalf? Or in the American heartlands, whether red or blue, could community churches really stay completely out of the local political fray? No, they could not. So, why has it become such a hot potato in Japan, and what elements need to be more closely questioned by the press? The analysis of 4,238 stories from August through to November across the mainstream media, Yomiuri, Sankei, Asahi, Mainichi, and Nihon Keizai, which is the Nikkei, found that not one gave a positive angle on the Unification Church. The story was fueled by television reporting and interviews with those hostile to the church, some of whom had links to the Japanese Communist Party. That left-right rivalry, which is becoming more prominent again in national and international affairs. Yes, there is evidence of reporting bias, but in journalism, a tsunami or prairie fire of reporting is not uncommon. Recently, here in Britain, the coverage of the death of the late Queen Elizabeth II carried barely a murmur from those who wanted to abolish the monarchy or anyone who had a bad word to say about her. With more impact, there was lack of critical questioning on the invasion of Iraq. It had no weapons of mass destruction, the ostensible reason for overthrowing Saddam Hussein. That led to war and unrest that shook the Middle East, costing so many lives and failing to bring stability. Which is why critical questioning is so necessary with what is unfolding in Japan. Now, I don't have the answers. I don't know exactly what's happening, but after many decades of reporting from around the world, I do have the questions. Who is ultimately benefiting? What does Shinzo Abe represent? What is the Unification Church exactly, and how does it operate? Let me start with that last question. I've known the church and many of its associated organizations for more than a quarter of a century. Back in the mid-1990s, when I was the BBC bureau chief in Beijing, it helped me get into North Korea with enviable access to places and officials normally denied to the media. At that time, the Church was a pivotal player in negotiations to prevent a flare-up or full-scale conflict on the Korean peninsula, and the framework agreement that emerged was in no small part due to the work of the late Antonio Betancourt and his colleagues in the Unification Church. I did know about its views. The Church makes no secret that its political heart is embedded in want of a better phrase, conservative values, and its connections run to the very top of the Republican leadership in the United States, as seen by some of the prominent figures taking part in this discussion. So, what about Shinzo Abe? He was the mastermind of Japan's new robust security and foreign policy, pushing for changes to the pacifist constitution. In the past few hours, the Japanese government has underpinned Abe's vision by announcing a security strategy that ramps up the defense budget and describes China as an unprecedented strategic challenge to ensuring the peace in Japan and the international community. Earlier, it had announced it would be buying offensive Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States and building a new fighter aircraft with Britain and Italy. The campaign against the Unification Church has undoubtedly weakened elements of the Japanese government. Shinzo Abe, the founder of the current strategic vision, is dead. Many voices opposed to what that vision represents come from what is broadly known as the left. There's that left-right rivalry again. In journalistic slang, we call this a story with many feet. The Unification Church is just one. It is time that that needle of interest examined other strands of this story, which is essentially about the battle for the ideological heart of Japan, the Indo-Pacific's most successful democracy, caught in the crosshairs of change. Thank you very much.